By March 6, 1945, Adolf Hitler did not have a lot of time to kick back. The final German offensive on the Western Front had failed. The Soviet winter offensive had placed them just over 40 miles from the poorly defended capital of Berlin. Operation Spring Awakening was the dictator's last-ditch effort to prolong the war by securing the Hungarian oil fields that fed the Nazi war machine. Again, the operation failed. By April 2nd, the oil fields belonged to the Soviets, and 30 days later, the red banner would fly over the city that Hitler envisioned to be at the center of his continental empire. We all know the end of the story, but before the Great Downfall, shortly after the Nazis took control of the German state, Adolf Hitler got to fully enjoy the leisures of total power, and his favorite relaxation from the stresses of dictatorship was watching movies. According to Hitler's architect Albert Speer, he watched one or two movies every night from the early 30s up until the beginning of the war, at which point Hitler declared that he would give up his favorite entertainment out of, quote, sympathy for the privations of the soldiers. The projector was then stashed away in favor of the record player. Hitler's pre-war appetite for new movies was so intense that even foreign films were frequently shown. In early 1939, Joseph Goebbels gifted Hitler 12 Mickey Mouse films to improve his mood. Not exactly the movies you'd expect to play inside the Wolfslinger. The German films he liked the most were played multiple times. According to Heinrich Hoffmann, he watched one German film with Hitler over 20 times, a film directed by a half-Jewish man by the name of Fritz Lang. Fritz Lang would eventually leave Germany and his wife to become one of the great directors of Hollywood. But long before the big heat, Goebbels and Hitler were enamored with Lang because of a single film, Die Nibelungen, or The Nibelungs. Based on the epic poem The Song of the Nibelungs, which was written in the 13th century, Fritz Lang's two-part epic is widely considered to be one of the great film achievements of the 1920s. Before we even get into the story itself and the elements of it that Hitler enjoyed, it's worth noting that the content of the films themselves were often of secondary interest to the Fuhrer. Bill Niven points out in his book, Hitler in Film, that perhaps his greatest focus was on the acting performances. Being a trained orator himself, Hitler liked to critique the abilities of actors, and some of the actors he respected were, just like Fritz Lang, Jewish. One of these appreciated actors being Adolf Walbrook, who fled Germany and went on to star in the 1948 masterpiece, The Red Shoes. Given the tremendous acting in the Nibelungs and the technical innovation, it's hardly surprising why Hitler was impressed. Most people were, including Joseph Goebbels, who initially commented that it was a typically Jewish concoction, but the Jew knows how to direct. I mean, look at this shot. So damn cool. Now, the other side of the coin is, Hitler saw many well-acted, innovative movies. Why was this one so captivating? To answer that question, we need to meet the main character, Siegfried of Xanten. This is not a hero's journey. Siegfried is not on his way to become something, he already is something. He's a perfectly sculpted German hero, courageous, gregarious, independent, and well aware of his own greatness. Siegfried desires a wife worthy of his choice, Kriemhild, the Princess of Burgundy. This is where our story begins. And unlike the classic hero's journey, Siegfried slays the dragon in the first act, not to rescue Kriemhild or her kingdom, but for the challenge, for the glory. He's the aggressor in the scene. You actually feel sympathy for the old dragon. He's kinda pathetic as far as dragons are concerned. According to Hitler's pilot in World War I ace Hans Bauer, Hitler would actually cover his eyes in movie scenes where an animal is being hunted and wouldn't open them again until the deed was done. I'd be very curious what his reaction was to this slaying. After bathing in the blood of the dragon to gain Achillean invulnerability, Siegfried continues his hike to Burgundy. When his name reaches the princess, he will be known as the Dragon Slayer. Following the loss of World War I and the ensuing economic catastrophe, Fritz Lang said that he wanted to showcase a character who is the image of strength. Through the story of Siegfried, the crippled and humiliated nation could, quote, draw inspiration from her epic past. But the director was not the only one who saw parallels between a strong, thriving Germany and the heroic Prince of Xanten. Having already seen Siegfried's story through Wagner's opera The Ring of the Nibelung, Hitler wrote the following about the reaction to one of his Munich speeches in 1920, which ended with rapturous applause. Nearly 4 hours had passed when the hall began to clear. As the masses streamed towards the exits, crammed shoulder to shoulder, shoving and pushing, I knew that a movement was now set afoot among the German people. A fire was enkindled from whose glowing heat the sword would be fashioned, which would restore freedom to the German Siegfried and bring back life to the German nation. If you forgive the audaciousness of youth, which is eventually leveled out by Kriemhild's beauty, the sword of Siegfried is never used unjustly. If you're fair to the prince, he will be fair to you. For this reason, he kindles a friendship with the weak King Gunther of Burgundy and wins him a queen in this remarkable scene. After Brunhilde is won for King Gunther, our hero is allowed to marry the princess. And after their marriage, Siegfried appears to have reached the mountaintop. His reputation as a warrior is unmatched, he's invulnerable to the swords of man, and he has a pile of treasure so large that he can give armfuls away joyfully. But because of the winds of fate and treachery of those around him, Siegfried is not allowed to grow his legend further. Brunhilde deceives her new husband by telling him that Siegfried violated her before their marriage was consummated. In a vengeful act of betrayal, Gunther sends his hatchet man Hagen to murder his blood brother. Hagen then uses the naive Kriemhild to accomplish his mission. The tragic betrayal of the young hero is also called upon by Hitler in Mein Kampf as he rages against the, quote, parliamentary sharpers, who he claims betrayed the German army by allowing South Tyrol to be annexed by Italy. The parliamentary sharpers did not take part in that combat. The whole canale played party politics. On the other hand, we carried on the fight in the belief that a victorious issue of the war would enable the German nation to keep South Tyrol also. But the loudmouth traitor carried on a seditious agitation against such a victorious issue until the fighting Siegfried succumbed to the dagger plunged in his back. So, how does Hitler want to respond to the, quote, fighting Siegfried's betrayal? He tells the reader not to put their hopes in God or the League of Nations, but the force of arms. He writes, therefore, the only question remaining is, who is ready to take up arms for the restoration of the lost territories? From what we know, Goebbels and Hitler were taken with only part 1 of the Nibelungs. Part 1 is the story of Siegfried, his greatness and betrayal. Part 2 does not feature the hero at all. Instead, the story is found in the title, Kriemhild's Revenge. Much like the dictator's words in Mein Kampf, the widow sees no possibility of justice through peaceful protest or prayer. Her brothers are fiercely loyal to Hagen and will not give in to Kriemhild's demands to have him punished. So she gives herself over to a foreign king, Attila, in exchange for the force of arms necessary to have her vengeance. Kriemhild's Revenge is an amazing movie. I actually prefer it to part 1. And the moral of the story is clear. Instead of appreciating what she has left, her family, her kingdom, her health, she allows the pursuit of revenge to corrupt her. In the end, she loses everything, and Siegfried is still gone. Such is the irony of Hitler's appreciation for the Nibelungs. His desire to right wrongs, which were never wrongs to begin with, ended with the complete destruction of his nation. It makes me wonder if during Hitler's final 100 days in the bunker, when he was left alone with his thoughts, he ever considered the Nibelungs and his parallels with Kriemhild. Or maybe he thought of himself as another Siegfried, destined for greatness but sabotaged by the fools around him. Knowing human nature, probably the latter. Adolf Hitler dedicated his adult life to crafting a grand narrative about the German state, which was articulated in Mein Kampf and his subsequent rise to total power. Certain elements of that narrative he also saw in the life and death of Siegfried. When you combine that with the technical brilliance of Lang's film and the superb acting, it's not hard to understand why he forced Heinrich Hoffmann to watch the film with him over 20 times. Mickey Mouse, on the other hand, still can't wrap my head around that image. Alright guys, if you have not seen The Nibelungs, you can check it out for free on YouTube, which is awesome. It's okay to enjoy a movie Hitler liked. He also drank water, so no need to open an anonymous browser. And if you want to see more videos like this in the future, make sure to like and subscribe on your way out. Have a fantastic rest of your day. I will talk to you soon.